Special education. I bet if I asked each of you what popped into your head when I said those two words, each of you would have a different answer. Some of you may have pictured a great experience with a learner. Some of you may have experienced a thought of a little more frustration. Others of you may have pictured your own child. For me, I picture all three of those. Now, if I ask you to picture innovation in special education, you might be picturing more of a question mark, because isn't special education, by definition, already personalized to the needs of each of our students? Yes, but I can tell you, as a special education teacher, that as I learned about innovating education through using specific strategies, including priority standards, standards-based assessments, and proficiency scales, all of which I'll talk about here, my own teaching was transformed. In the next few minutes, I'm going to touch on those topics I just mentioned, what they can look like in action with special ed learners, and how to overcome those yeah, buts, or those thoughts that pop into your head that tell you something's not going to work. But first, I want to address why every person in this room, not just special ed teachers, really need to focus on special ed learners. Our nation's special ed law, IDEA, requires us to educate students with special needs in their least restrictive environment. Because of this, nearly 2/3 of special ed students spend most of their school days in general ed settings, reinforcing the idea that special education is a service, not a place. Nationally, over 13% of our public school students are on individualized education plans and receiving special ed services. That's 6.7 million students every year. In North Dakota, in 2017, we had over 15,000 students receiving special ed services. Therefore, all educators need to be cognizant of the needs of these learners and the best teaching practices to reach these learners. So what can innovating special ed look like? Let's take a look at what using priority standards, standards-based assessments, and proficiency scales can look like with our special ed learners. Education researcher Robert Marzano has stated that if teachers were to teach every standard, students would need to be in school through 22nd grade. I've taught seniors. That's not a good idea for anybody. To help focus instruction, priority standards can be identified. These are the 10 to 12 standards selected in each subject area at each level that need to be taught to proficiency because of their importance in understanding the subject matter or in being the building blocks of upcoming instruction. These are the standards that are going to be explicitly taught and specifically assessed, with time devoted to going back or reteaching students who didn't learn to proficiency the first time around. For example, I used the 12th grade English priority standards to plan instruction for my senior developmental English class. I used To Kill a Mockingbird as our base text, and I was able to design instruction that covered all of the 12th grade English language arts standards, priority standards, covering reading, writing, research, and presentation skills. The unit provided ample time for instruction, practice, and feedback, as well as time to revisit any areas that were difficult for my learners on the first go-around. For a high school student who had autism, was nonverbal, and was new to our school without a lot of background information coming with him, I was able to start with kindergarten priority standards in each of the subject areas, work our way through them, and I knew exactly what he was ready to move on to next. And even better, as he walks into school next week with a brand new teacher, that teacher's going to know exactly where to pick up with this student and not waste any time figuring out what we needed to figure out last year. Yeah, but maybe your school hasn't identified priority standards yet. That's okay. As special ed teachers, a lot of times we're teaching multiple subjects and multiple grade levels every day. Just start with one. Pick a subject, pick a grade level, look at the state standards, and pick some out to start with. You may change your mind later or next year, and that's okay. Perfection isn't required, but a growth mindset is. Next, I want to take a look at standards-based assessments. With standards-based assessments, learning is assessed on what the learner can do and not on behavioral components, such as when it was turned in. Grades are not based on extra credit or on how neat the handwriting was. It's simply answering the question of, can the student do this standard? For example, if a learner is struggling with writing, the learner can show what she knows in a variety of ways. If standards ask a student to demonstrate understanding and the student can explain it verbally, that's demonstrating understanding. Special educators and general educators can be flexible in how material is presented and can adjust both the rigor and the method of assessment as needed for our learners. I've witnessed firsthand how standards-based assessments allow learners to take on ownership of their learning. One of my favorite stories from this past school year was my co-taught 10th grade English class. We had just finished reading the book Night by Elie Wiesel. If you have not read it, it's your homework to go find that book and read it. It's excellent. Our culminating project that I had designed had learners selecting which of 3 Holocaust memorials did the best job of fulfilling Elie Wiesel's goal of memorializing the victims of the Holocaust. One learner came to me and said, "You know how you're always telling us that we can change things up to make them work better for us?" "Yep." "Well, instead of picking a memorial, could I design my own memorial?" Well, we looked at the priority standards we were working with, and we were easily able to adjust the project to make that an option. Other learners also opted for this version of the assessment, and they turned out so well that the class decided to turn it into a presentation and invited others into our room to see their final products. Yeah, but you don't know if your assessments are strictly standards-based. That's okay. Once you've decided which standards you're going to be focusing on, you can take out the current assessments that you're using, match it up, see what fits and what doesn't. And make sure you ask your students what works for them, because a lot of times they have really great ideas. Next, we're going to take a look at proficiency scales. I'm a fan of the 4-point proficiency scale designed by Marzano. Level 1 indicates that a student is not able to independently do what a standard is asking them to do. Level 2 is background knowledge, such as vocabulary and any prior learning that needs to take place before proficiency could be reached. Level 3 is our goal, proficiency. The student can do what the standard asks them to do. A level 4 is going to indicate learning beyond what happened in the classroom or what was expected. Grading then takes the place of the level of understanding instead of traditional letter grades. Proficiency scales allow us to show the depth of understanding a student has and how that grows over time. Traditional letter grades, on the other hand, are an average of scores on different items over a set period of time and are not designed to show growth. Like standards-based assessments, we're looking at what students can do and not on behaviors such as turning something in on a particular day. To account for the behavioral side of learning, some schools, like my former district, used a separate mark called a habits of work grade that could also be introduced as well. As with most things, innovation can look a little different for special ed learners and teachers. Last year when I was still in the classroom, the most often asked question I got was, "What does a typical day look like for you?" Well, if you're a special educator, you know there's never a typical day. But what classes I was teaching last year included MTSS, or targeted interventions for reading and math students. I was lucky enough to get to co-teach a few different classes, so I had amazing general ed teachers, and myself would be co-teaching so that all students were in the general ed setting and receiving all of the supports that they needed. I also taught developmental courses that were considered special ed classes designed to meet the needs of the kids in that particular classroom. I had students doing school to work experiences, help them learn those responsibility skills, those soft skills, communicating with a superior. And one of my favorite classes to teach we called Applied Topics in School and Life Skills. This class really focused on executive functioning and organizational skills. We did daily planner checks, daily writing activities, weekly grade checks, a weekly cooking activity, and then the rest of the time was theirs to work with me or in small groups to get the rest of their classwork completed. Innovating education is happening all around North Dakota, and it's a really exciting time for all of us in education. I urge school administrators to remember to include special educators at the table as you discuss these changes. Oftentimes, our bag of tricks can be useful not only for special ed learners, but for all of our learners. And we usually have pretty good snacks hiding in our room, too. If you have any questions, I would love for you to contact me. My email address is up there. Our new West River website will be rolling out in the next few weeks. And we just started a Twitter address. I was very excited that we are now up to double-digit followers, 10. So if you could add to that, I would love it. And thank you very much for your time today.